This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KBNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Well, we have Corky Messner on with us, and I am really happy to get him on the show to discuss his latest effort. He is an attorney. He's a former GOP nominee for U.S. Senate, endorsed by Donald Trump, I might add. And Corky, you've made some headline news, and I'll tell you, with all candor, I agree with you regarding Trump being on the ballot, and you can dissect why you're pushing for this, and you can also talk about some recent convictions, headline news this week. How are you this morning?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me just say, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution essentially says if somebody had previously taken an oath to the Constitution, i.e. a former office holder like former President Trump, and that person then engages in insurrection or rebellion, and I want to emphasize engages, not convicted of, engages in insurrection or rebellion, or gives aid and comfort to those who do, that person is disqualified from running for office again. And it's a qualification just like Article 2. You know, in Article 2 of the Constitution, you got to be a certain age, you got to be a natural-born citizen, you got to have lived in the United States. And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is, in fact, another qualification just like in Article 2. And interestingly, in Section 3, at the end it says the disability, i.e. the disqualification, can be removed by two-thirds vote of the House and the Senate.
Wow, federally. Now, how did you actually make this, or, I mean, did you write a letter to the Secretary of State saying I oppose Trump's name added to the ballot? How did you administratively issue this opposition?
Yeah, and Tom, let me be clear. My position on this is I am an advocate of the Constitution. And I think one of the issues we have here is this Section 3 has never been interpreted. So my position is that we need to get this issue into litigation and in front of the U.S. Supreme Court so the U.S. Supreme Court can interpret it. So I'm not advocating for him to not be on the ballot. You know, I think what happened, Tom, when I read this law review article by two distinguished conservative legal scholars, last name's Baude, B-A-U-D-E, and the other last name is Paulsen, P-A-U-L-S-E-N. It's a 124-page law review article that I found to be very compelling, and in fact, those authors conclude that Trump is disqualified. So my position is, let's get this thing in front of the Supreme Court so they can make a decision.
Some of the scholars, Corky, and I agree with you 100%. We're talking with Corky Messner from New Hampshire. Some say was what happened, the two big questions was what happened on January 6, 2021 in insurrection. Others say what was President Trump's role to answer your question with this concern. Yesterday we saw not just an indictment, a sentencing. Would you say that bears weight and is instructive to your argument? And so maybe you can explain what happened yesterday so the public understand with the Proud Boy leadership.
Yeah, yesterday I think the number 2 person of the Proud Boys was sentenced after he was convicted of seditious conspiracy, and he was sentenced to 17 years in prison for their role relating to January 6th. And if one looks at the U.S. Code definition of seditious conspiracy, it is quite obvious that it is incredibly similar to the definition of insurrection used in the Bod-Paulson article. So now this is in addition to the number one person of the Oath Keepers. Stuart Rhodes was convicted also of seditious conspiracy and sentenced to 18 years with respect to the January 6th events. Now, the sort of an interesting fact that people will be hearing more about if they haven't heard about it now. On the night of January 5th, Giuliani, Roger Stone, the others had their headquarters set up, I forget what hotel in Washington, D.C., and Mark Meadows was going to go there but was urged not to, but he called in. Security for them at that hotel was provided by the Oath Keepers. So there's a lot of evidence out there that I think tends to get swept under the rug. But
it hasn't come to light. Yeah, boy. By the way, Corky,
yeah.
Scanlon, Sununu, what's the Secretary of State's office response? What's the governor's? From what I've read, they haven't weighed in. They said they're still analyzing. There's no answer yet.
No, there's no answer. I met with Secretary of State Scanlon a week ago today. He's being very conscientious about this, Tom. He's being very serious about it. He wants to get legal guidance. You know, I suggested to him that it's a good idea to get legal guidance and that, you know, we ought to think about how best to get this into the court system, to get it to the U.S. Supreme Court. I know they're consulting with the Attorney General of New Hampshire. I know Sununu is involved. I urged yesterday on a radio show for the first time that Sununu ask the New Hampshire Supreme Court for an advisory opinion, which under New Hampshire law he's permitted to do, and I think that would be very helpful. But the important thing here, Tom, I think for conservatives, we can't ignore the Constitution.
No.
And I am surprised at how many conservatives just kind of want to poo-poo this and say, that was a Civil War era part of the Constitution. Well, guess what's else in the 14th Amendment? The Equal Protection Clauses in the 14th Amendment. The Due Process Clauses in the 14th Amendment. You know, so those, the 14th Amendment was written to be long-lasting.
Absolutely.
And
well, it's the religiosity of the Trump supporters, and I voted for him and supported him long ago, so did you. But, I mean, I think of New Hampshire's GOP, I'm sure they're not thrilled. I'm sure Trump's team is not thrilled. Have you been attacked or badgered by them?
Well, I've been attacked so much and badgered so much. I don't know exactly where it's coming from. I am disappointed in the New Hampshire GOP. I think some of their statements actually are kind of embarrassing. And, you know, the chairman said that, gee, the voters ought to decide everyone ought to be on the ballot, to which my response is, if Elon Musk showed up and wanted to be on the ballot, would you allow him on the ballot? We all know, of course, that Elon Musk was born in South Africa and would be disqualified.
Yeah, that's an obtuse statement from the GOP chairman. I don't think he's thinking logically there. And I think they have to, like you said, the Secretary of State is taking this seriously. And I think the GOP should, and I think it's instructive for other states' GOP. I mean, I've already spoken to my team here in Alaska because I think they should consider the same. I truly do. Now, the $1 million question probably from the audience is, does Corky have a vendetta against Trump, or does he support someone else against Trump, and is there an underlying motive, which I do not believe there is?
I have not even decided who I'm going to vote for in the primary in New Hampshire. I have said publicly, and I'll say it again publicly, if Donald J. Trump is the Republican nominee for president in November of 2024, I will vote for him. I am an advocate for the Constitution. And someone's got to be an advocate for a Constitution.
Absolutely.
For the Constitution.
It's so true.
And here's some nuance to this, Tom, that people need
Well,
to
Corky,
realize.
what I'm going to have you do, forgive me, but you have a radio show in New Hampshire. Let's stick with us. Just 2-minute break. We'll come right back with Corky Messner from New Hampshire. Stay with us. Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KBNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
So the 14th Amendment, maybe you learn about it in college, maybe in high school if you were lucky to have a smart teacher engaged. What happened on January 6, 2021, many say an insurrection. What was then President Trump's role? Well, we have Corky Messner on because he thinks there was a connection. And as a result, from Trump, he's ineligible to be on the New Hampshire ballot. And I would agree with Corky. So, Corky, as we continue this dialogue, timing, New Hampshire voters with elections forthcoming, and then also the domino effect. Do you think other states will follow your lead? I would hope if New Hampshire prevents him from being on the ballot, I would sure hope that other states, Secretary of States, we don't have a Secretary of State, but Attorney General, review this.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum on this issue throughout the country, Tom. I am particularly concerned about New Hampshire and the first-in-the-nation primary, and that this issue be decided sooner rather than later. And the reason I am is if we have our primary and Trump, it is determined that Trump is eligible to be on the ballot for the New Hampshire primary, but later it's determined he's ineligible to be on the ballot for the presidency, then the Republican voters in New Hampshire that voted in the primary will have been disenfranchised. So I think the NHGOP needs to look at it from that perspective to make sure that each New Hampshire voter vote is counted. And you know, if you have someone on the ballot that turns out to be not qualified, ineligible, that's going to be bad for the New Hampshire voters. In addition, Tom, there are other states that are going to address this issue as the cycle goes on, and there's some very nightmare scenarios here. If Trump becomes the nominee or is the presumptive nominee, and that some of the swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, if their Supreme Courts decide that Trump is disqualified to be on the ballot in those states, then there's no chance of Trump winning the election.
No. By the way, I have to delineate something about you. I mean, you don't like to hear this, but you're somewhat of a celebrity in GOP circles in New Hampshire with my contacts because, my God, you're a veteran, West Point, prominent attorney. You're an altruistic guy. You donate. You in advocacy. You're a true conservative. You've walked the walk. You've practiced what you preach. New Hampshire Advantage PAC. I know the people that surround you. There are Fred Doucette's. I can name some people in Alaska won't know the names, but you're a true patriot, conservative, constitutionalist, and I say that because I want people to know really the DNA of Corky Messner. So when you speak to this issue, I think a lot of people listen. I think it's a big deal. You as the spokesperson, you have a lot of credibility.
Well, and thank you for saying that, Tom, because it is important. And you're correct. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And as an officer, as a West Point graduate, I took that oath, and that's why I want to be an advocate for the Constitution. In addition, I have two sons who are West Point graduates, both of whom took the very same oath, both of whom are serving right now in the United States Army. So yes, the oath of the Constitution to me is real, it's important, and we must pay attention to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
Absolutely. In Alaska, we see fractured Republican, cabals and groups. I've seen it. I have an ad agency, so I work in other states. I just got out of Nevada, and I watched the consternation between GOP members. Let's talk New Hampshire real quick before we wrap it up, and how people can support you. We'll end with that. But just New Hampshire politics. Can you describe to the public? I mean, I wish to God you would have won that U.S. Senate seat, but you have two liberals in U.S. Senate, two liberals in Congress. Is New Hampshire a far left blue state, or is it one that could change to conservative and Republican to right at some point?
It is a purple state, Tom. I mean, our entire federal delegation is Democrat. Our entire state government is Republican. Go figure that one out. But yeah, I mean, this state can go either way. And what happened in 2020 is, the independents, here we call them undeclareds, they went heavily to the Democrat side. And Trump lost in 2020 by about 6 or 7 points in New Hampshire, when in 2016 he only lost by 3,000 votes. So
right.
This is a state that can go either way, and right now the Republican Party needs to, I think, come together. And I would say, point one, they need to come together and defend the Constitution here. And listen, one of the reasons I say this is in Trump's interest to have the Supreme Court decide. I mean, the Supreme Court may in fact decide that he is not disqualified under Section 3, and Trump would want that because then he doesn't have it hanging over his head.
Agreed. I totally agree. By the way, someone just texted me because we're not taking calls. They said, "Why doesn't Corky run for governor?"
Yeah, Tom, that's kind for that person to say that. I gave my shot at politics. I like being an advocate. I like being an activist. I like helping people. One of the things I learned in running for office, and this should not surprise many people, is the entire system's corrupt. Washington, D.C. is the swamp. There's no question about it. And I just don't want to, spend the rest of my life, I'm 66, soon to be 67, fighting, defending myself from becoming corrupt like everybody else.
Well, and your advocacy and your efforts are profound. They're going to be your legacy without question. Last question to Corky Messner. How can the public, we're going to make a YouTube video, comment below once the video's up. Folks in Alaska, how can people help? Are you looking for donations or support, or are you just hoping people follow you in respective states and answer the same question you're seeking an answer to?
Yeah, I think short term, the way they can really help me is reach out to the New Hampshire GOP and tell them to get on the ball and defend the Constitution. Because I think it would be really helpful if they get on board with this instead of popping off with kind of embarrassing sound bites.
Well, and if we get, Republicans in Alaska, our leadership, Republicans in other states where I know Republican colleagues listen to my show, they can do that. And I think from Republican GOP leadership in other states, that's going to be more compelling in New Hampshire. So I hope they do that. Corky Messner, God bless you. Thank you for your service and your patriotism. And I hope this comes to a fruition with a good response from your Secretary of State.
Me too, Tom. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. That's Corky Messner in New Hampshire, the great state of New Hampshire, fighting the fight. And I'm telling you right now, it's a very important answer that needs to be given from the state of New Hampshire. Think about it. Think about the results if Donald J. Trump is not on the New Hampshire ballot. If there is a result, if there is a response to January 6, 2021, if it's interpreted as Corky delineates, as the Proud Boys conviction and sentences yesterday came to fruition, this is a big deal. And Corky talks about the constitutionalism of this. That's really the foundational question, is it not? Stay with us. Good morning, everybody. Tom Anderson Show.